Did you hear what just happened on Maplewood Street? That's how the gossip began. Words whispered over fences, traded on porches, and passed between neighbors like wildfire. It all started with one phone call. One decision. A white neighbor named Karen picked up her phone and dialed the HOA, the Homeowners Association, determined to complain about the new black family that had just moved in next door. But what she didn't expect. That call would backfire in a way that shook the entire neighborhood, and exposed more than she was ready to admit. The Johnson family had only just arrived. Marcus and Alicia Johnson had finally purchased their dream home, something they had worked toward for over a decade. Their new place was picture-perfect, a cozy two-story house with green shutters, a big welcoming porch, and a wide front lawn where their kids could run and play. For Marcus and Alicia, it wasn't just about bricks and paint. This house represented years of saving, sacrifice, and late nights working overtime. It was the place where they imagined birthday parties in the backyard, warm summer evenings grilling, and their children riding bikes safely up and down the street. It was more than a house, it was a new chapter. But to Karen, the neighbor watching from behind her blinds, none of that mattered. The moment the moving truck pulled up, she folded her arms and frowned. As boxes were carried in, as laughter echoed from the kids discovering their new rooms, Karen's eyes narrowed. Instead of welcoming them with a smile, she saw something she didn't like. And she made up her mind, she would find a reason, any reason, to make sure this family knew they didn't belong. At first, her complaints seemed almost trivial. During the first week, she called the HOA claiming the Johnsons had let their grass grow too long. The truth? Their lawn was freshly mowed, neat, and green. The second week, she grumbled about the kids leaving bikes near the driveway. As if children playing outside was some kind of crime. By the third week, her frustration hit a boiling point. The Johnsons had placed a small basketball hoop in front of their garage so the kids could shoot hoops after school. To Karen, this was the final straw. She glared out her window, muttering under her breath, and finally picked up her phone. "Hello? Yes, this is Karen from Maplewood Street," she said sharply. "I need to report a violation. The new family next door, they're bringing down the look of our neighborhood. Something needs to be done." Her voice carried a tone of authority, the kind that expected immediate agreement. She thought the HOA would jump into action, back her up, and put the Johnsons in their place. But Karen had no idea who was on the other end of that line. The HOA president, Mr. Thompson, was not someone easily swayed by gossip or prejudice. A retired school principal, he was known for being fair, thoughtful, and firm when it came to neighborhood issues. He listened carefully as Karen ranted for nearly 10 minutes straight. She listed off the basketball hoop, the sound of kids laughing and playing, the cars parked neatly in the driveway, things any reasonable person would see as normal. But the more Karen spoke, the more obvious it became, this wasn't about rules. This was about the Johnsons themselves. Mr. Thompson didn't say much on the call. He simply thanked Karen for her concerns and promised to take a closer look. But inside, he already knew what this was really about. The very next morning, Mr. Thompson drove to Maplewood Street. Clipboard in hand, he walked up the Johnsons' porch and knocked politely. Alicia answered, her expression uncertain. "Did we do something wrong?" she asked nervously. Mr. Thompson smiled warmly. "Not at all. I just came to officially welcome you to the neighborhood." Then he explained why he was there, that a neighbor had filed a complaint. The Johnsons exchanged uneasy glances. They already had a good idea who that neighbor might be. But as Mr. Thompson looked around, he couldn't help but shake his head. The lawn was trimmed. The cars were properly parked. The basketball hoop, completely allowed under HOA rules. And the children's bikes, neatly stacked by the side of the house. "Everything here is in perfect order," he told Marcus and Alicia. "You haven't broken a single rule. The problem isn't you, it's the complaint." Relieved but still uneasy, the Johnsons thanked him. And Mr. Thompson made a silent promise to himself, this wasn't going to end with them feeling unwelcome. Because if anyone in this neighborhood was out of line, it wasn't the Johnson family. The first week, Karen claimed the Johnsons' grass was too long. The second week, she complained about their kids leaving bikes near the driveway. By the third week, she was furious because the Johnsons had set up a small basketball hoop in front of the garage. Each time, she scribbled down notes, snapped photos with her phone, and muttered angrily under her breath as if she was building a legal case. To her, every little thing the Johnsons did was an offense. Every laugh, every toy, every car parked in their driveway, Karen saw it as an attack on her neighborhood. One evening, after glaring out her window at the children shooting hoops in the driveway, Karen had had enough. Her jaw tightened, her fingers gripped her phone, and with one sharp breath she dialed. "Hello? HOA?" she said, her voice dripping with annoyance. "Yes, this is Karen from Maplewood Street. I need to report a violation." She paused dramatically, as if her words were the most urgent news of the day. "The new family next door is ruining the look of our neighborhood." She went on and on, her voice rising with each complaint. She listed the basketball hoop, the sound of children playing, the cars parked neatly in the Johnsons' own driveway, and even mentioned how often delivery trucks came by, conveniently ignoring the fact that she ordered packages almost daily herself. What Karen didn't realize was that the man on the other end of the line, Mr. Thompson, was not the type of leader who could be fooled by petty grievances, or poisoned by prejudice. Mr. Thompson was the HOA president, and he carried himself with quiet authority. A retired school principal, he had spent decades keeping order among students, teachers, and even parents. He had learned long ago how to listen carefully, how to read between the lines, and how to spot when someone's concerns weren't really about rules at all. As Karen rattled on, Mr. Thompson didn't interrupt. He let her talk, let her expose the bitterness behind her words. For nearly 10 minutes, Karen painted a picture of the Johnsons as unruly neighbors. But to Mr. Thompson, the picture didn't add up. Basketball hoops were allowed. Kids playing outside was normal. Cars in one's own driveway weren't a violation. Nothing Karen described actually broke HOA rules. The longer she spoke, the more obvious the truth became. This wasn't about grass, bikes, or basketball. This was about the Johnsons themselves, who they were, what they looked like, and the fact that Karen simply didn't want them living next door. Mr. Thompson's voice, calm but firm, finally cut in. "Thank you for bringing your concerns to my attention, Karen," he said smoothly. "I'll need to see things for myself before taking any action." Karen hesitated. She had expected him to immediately agree, to issue warnings, maybe even fines. Instead, she got neutrality. Her lips tightened, but she forced a polite, "Of course. I knew you'd understand." After hanging up, Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair. His years as a principal had taught him how to handle difficult personalities. Karen reminded him of the kind of parent who would storm into his office, demanding a teacher be punished, when the real issue was their own child's behavior. He recognized the same pattern now, loud complaints to cover up weak reasoning. The next morning, clipboard in hand, Mr. Thompson drove to Maplewood Street. The neighborhood looked calm, quiet, almost too perfect with its trimmed hedges and neat sidewalks. But behind those closed doors, he knew tension was brewing. Pulling up in front of the Johnsons' house, he stepped out of his car and adjusted his glasses. The home looked beautiful, freshly painted shutters, a clean lawn, flowers in bloom along the walkway. He could already see the care Marcus and Alicia had poured into it. He walked up the porch steps and knocked gently on the front door. Alicia answered, her eyes wide with worry. "Did we do something wrong?" she asked, her voice soft, uncertain. Mr. Thompson gave her a reassuring smile. "Not at all," he replied warmly. "I just came to welcome you to the neighborhood." Behind her, Marcus appeared, cautious but polite. He studied the clipboard in Mr. Thompson's hand, bracing himself for bad news. Mr. Thompson explained why he was there, that a complaint had been made, and he needed to look around. The Johnsons exchanged a quick glance. They already suspected who might be behind it. As Mr. Thompson stepped back to observe, what he saw only confirmed his instincts. The lawn. Neatly mowed. The cars. Parked properly in the driveway. The children's bikes. Lined up to the side of the house, hardly a problem. And the basketball hoop. A standard, perfectly allowed setup. He wrote down notes, then looked back at the Johnsons with a gentle nod. You haven't broken a single rule, he assured them. Everything here is exactly as it should be. The problem isn't you, it's the complaint. Relief washed over Alicia's face, while Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Thank you, he said quietly. Mr. Thompson smiled. Welcome to Maplewood Street. And don't worry, you have every right to be here. In that moment, he knew what had to come next. He wasn't just going to file away Karen's complaint. He was going to confront it, head on. Because if anyone in this neighborhood was out of line, it wasn't the Johnson family. Alicia opened the door slowly, her hands still dusted with flour from baking cookies for the kids. She looked nervous, her voice soft, almost apologetic. Did we do something wrong? Mr. Thompson's face broke into a warm smile, the kind that instantly put people at ease. He shook his head gently. Not at all, he said kindly. I just wanted to officially welcome you to the neighborhood. Relief flickered in Alicia's eyes, and she stepped back a little. Moments later, Marcus appeared at the doorway, wiping his hands on a towel, cautious but hopeful. He had heard stories about HOAs and difficult neighbors, and part of him braced for bad news. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and explained. I did receive a few complaints, he admitted, his voice steady. But I wanted to see things for myself. He glanced around as he spoke. The lawn. Freshly cut, neatly trimmed at the edges. The cars. Parked perfectly in the driveway, not blocking anyone. The small basketball hoop. Positioned neatly in front of the garage, exactly where it was allowed. Nothing was out of place. In fact, the Johnsons' home looked like something out of a magazine. You haven't broken a single rule, Mr. Thompson reassured them firmly. His eyes softened as he added, but I'm afraid your neighbor is, a little difficult. Marcus and Alicia exchanged a knowing look. They didn't even need to ask which neighbor he meant. They had felt Karen's glare through the blinds, seen her scowl when their children laughed too loudly, and noticed the way she turned her back when they waved hello. They already knew. Mr. Thompson gave them a final nod before leaving, promising them that they had nothing to fear. But as he drove down Maplewood Street, he knew there was one more stop to make. This situation needed to be handled directly. Later that afternoon, Mr. Thompson parked in front of Karen's house. The blinds twitched before he even stepped onto the porch. By the time he knocked, Karen was already at the door, a smug smile plastered across her face. Well, she asked, folding her arms. I trust you saw what I've been telling you about. It's disgraceful, isn't it? That family. But Mr. Thompson didn't let her finish. His voice was firm, carrying the weight of authority. Karen, he began, I visited the Johnson family today. I found no violations of our HOA rules. Their property is in excellent condition. The smugness drained from Karen's face. She blinked, her smile faltering. But the basketball hoop, she stammered. And the noise. And the cars. Mr. Thompson raised his hand, silencing her mid-sentence. His expression hardened. Children playing in their own driveway is not a violation, he said firmly. A basketball hoop is perfectly allowed. And their cars are parked correctly. The only issue I see here is your repeated, unfounded complaints. Karen's cheeks flushed crimson. She crossed her arms tighter, her voice rising with indignation. "So you're just going to let them get away with everything?" she snapped, her tone sharp and cutting. But Mr. Thompson didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed, and his voice grew colder, sharper. "They haven't done anything wrong," he replied. "But you have. Harassment of neighbors is unacceptable. And if you continue this behavior, the HOA will take action against you." For a moment, the world outside seemed to stand still. The only sound was the faint rustling of leaves in the trees overhead. Karen opened her mouth to argue but found no words. Her face twisted between anger and shock. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. She was used to being the loudest voice, the one people tiptoed around, the one who always got her way. But now, for the first time, someone had stood their ground, and it left her completely speechless. Her lips trembled as she tried to respond, but Mr. Thompson had already turned toward the street. His words echoed in her ears like a gavel striking down judgment. "They belong here, Karen. Just like you do. And it's time you learn to live with that." Karen slammed the door shut, her pride stinging, her cheeks still burning red. Word of the confrontation spread quickly. Neighbors whispered about it the next morning, some relieved that someone had finally put Karen in her place. Others were ashamed they hadn't spoken up sooner. As for the Johnsons, they felt a wave of relief unlike anything they had experienced since moving in. For the first time, they truly felt safe in their new home. The lawn seemed greener, the air lighter, and the sound of their children laughing carried freely through the neighborhood without fear of complaint. And Mr. Thompson? He walked away knowing he had done the right thing, not just as HOA president, but as a man who believed in fairness and community. Because sometimes, standing up to one person's prejudice can remind an entire street what it means to be neighbors. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. The story of what happened at Karen's door traveled faster than wildfire. Some people, who had quietly nodded along with her complaints before, suddenly found themselves feeling embarrassed. They realized that by staying silent, they had allowed her bitterness to poison the air. Others, however, felt a wave of relief. They had grown tired of Karen's constant nitpicking but hadn't known how to stop her. Finally, someone, Mr. Thompson, had stood up to her. And in doing so, he had given everyone else permission to breathe a little easier. For the Johnsons, life began to change almost overnight. Just a week earlier, Alicia had hesitated before stepping outside, wondering if she would be judged by the way she dressed or the sound of her children's laughter. Marcus had worried about whether the HOA would issue fines that might drive them out of their dream home. The children had asked quietly why the lady next door never smiled back at them. But now, instead of cold stares, there were warm smiles. Instead of silence, there were knocks at the door. Neighbors began stopping by, some carrying plates of cookies, others with small housewarming gifts. One older couple brought over a potted plant, saying, "Every new house deserves something that grows." The Johnson children found themselves invited to ride bikes with other kids on the block. What once felt like a hostile place slowly began to feel like home. Marcus decided to do something simple but powerful. One sunny evening, he wheeled out his grill to the driveway, the smell of burgers and hot dogs soon drifting through the air. As the aroma spread, neighbors began wandering over. Kids ran up with basketballs in their hands, eager to use the hoop that had once been the subject of complaints. Soon, the sound of bouncing balls, laughter, and cheering filled the street. Alicia set out paper plates and lemonade, smiling as she watched her children laughing freely with their new friends. For the first time since moving in, she felt the weight of fear lift off her shoulders. And then came the moment that sealed everything. Mr. Thompson himself strolled up the driveway, tipping his hat with a smile. "I heard there might be a burger with my name on it," he said warmly. Marcus laughed and handed him a plate. The sight of the HOA president sitting at a folding chair in the Johnsons' driveway, enjoying food and conversation, sent a clear message to the entire neighborhood: this family belonged here. Karen watched from behind her curtains, her face hidden in the shadows. She had lost her power, her whispers drowned out by the laughter outside. For all her complaints, she could do nothing but glare as the very community she thought she controlled came together in unity around the Johnsons. In the weeks that followed, life on Maplewood Street shifted. The Johnsons weren't just the new family anymore, they were friends, neighbors, and part of the community. And every time the kids shot hoops in the driveway, every time Marcus fired up the grill, and every time Alicia waved hello to a passing neighbor, the sound of belonging grew louder than prejudice ever could. Over time, Karen's power faded. The woman who once strutted across her lawn with confidence, quick to nitpick and complain, began to lose the very influence she thought she had. Without the HOA backing her, her voice grew weaker. Her complaints, once sharp and loud, turned into nothing more than whispers behind drawn curtains. People stopped listening. They stopped nodding in false agreement. They stopped being afraid of her. Karen became a shadow in the neighborhood she once tried to control. And though she still peeked out through her blinds, muttering to herself as children laughed and families gathered, the community had moved on without her. Meanwhile, the Johnson family thrived. What started as cautious smiles and nervous introductions soon turned into genuine friendships. They didn't just live on Maplewood Street, they became part of its heartbeat. Alicia began attending book clubs hosted by a group of moms on the block. Marcus volunteered to help repair a broken swing set at the park, quickly earning a reputation as the kind of neighbor who could fix anything. Their kids joined weekend bike rides with the other children, their laughter blending seamlessly with the sound of play echoing down the street. And then came the holidays. Instead of withdrawing, the Johnsons chose to open their doors wide. Their first Christmas on Maplewood Street, they hosted a holiday party. At first, Alicia worried that only a few people would come. But by the end of the night, their living room was filled with neighbors, the scent of home-cooked food mixing with the sound of carols and laughter. Children ran through the halls while adults shared stories by the fireplace. Even people who had once kept their distance now stood in the Johnsons' home, realizing just how wrong they had been to ever doubt their place in the neighborhood. It didn't stop there. Each year, the Johnsons' home became a gathering spot. Summer barbecues, Halloween nights, birthday celebrations, slowly, their presence became not just accepted, but cherished. What began as an attempt to push them out had instead pulled the community closer together. The message spread quietly but powerfully: prejudice had no place in Maplewood. Neighbors began looking out for each other in ways they hadn't before. When new families moved in, they were welcomed with warmth instead of suspicion. The street, once tense with Karen's negativity, blossomed into something brighter, stronger, and kinder. And through it all, Mr. Thompson remained a respected figure. His decision to stand up for fairness rippled far beyond that single confrontation. People admired his courage, and many admitted privately that his actions had given them the strength to examine their own silence. After all, it wasn't just Karen who had been at fault. It was also those who had stayed quiet while she spread her bitterness. The real lesson: sometimes all it takes is one strong voice, one fair leader, to silence hate. The Johnsons didn't just gain a house on Maplewood Street. They gained a home, a community, and a sense of belonging that no amount of bitterness could take away. They discovered that their dreams of backyard birthdays, summer grilling, and kids playing freely weren't just possible, they were celebrated. And Karen? She learned the hard way that calling the HOA on a family just because of the color of their skin was not only wrong, it was something that would never be tolerated again. Her power vanished, her influence gone. She became nothing more than a warning, a reminder of what happens when hate is allowed to fester. Because in the end, the laughter of children, the smell of barbecue on a summer evening, and the warmth of true community will always drown out the whispers of prejudice. And on Maplewood Street, that truth became louder than ever.